everyone. Hope you're good. Hope you can hear me. All the usual paranoia from me about tech, but it seems to be fairly stable at the moment. And so thank you so much for those of you that have given me all the feedback that I've needed to sort of piece this all together and to keep this show on the road. I think this is like, always baffles me when I'm putting these in. It was like 133. This is the episode 133 of this show, which is really cool. So thank you for helping me to keep this going. And also just have an opportunity to catch up with some of my nearest and dearest in this industry and ever emergent talents that I spot and try to make sure that they give voice to actual experts in this space, because that is my entire project across all different hats that I wear. Choose Health, Physio Matters, MSKR is about raising standards in MSK practice. And there's someone on the show today who I find is someone that really does represent that project well, in a sense that she's someone that speaks to what is considered sometimes a niche, but is applying quality MSK clinical reasoning principles to things like dance and performing arts. You will have heard her amongst many tens of thousands of you listen to the Physio Matters podcast with Liz Bayley on that very topic recently. And we've just been talking off air about the fact that she's then been pursuing various different things and speaking to various different audiences, students and otherwise, about that topic, which is definitely an interesting one. And I think it's not just because of the specific nature of dancers and performing artists, but also then the way in which that can be applied. You know, it is where athletic pursuit in a training aspect meets performance in a pressured environment. And I think that's what is fascinating to many. So without further ado, hopefully I can, in a couple of clicks, bring Liz in. And he says, where's me? This is where I'm, we've just said 133 episodes. I still don't know where my buttons are. There we go. There's Liz. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Super. Yes, thank you. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate this. Good to catch up.
Yeah, nice to speak to you.
We had the Physio Matters podcast, and one of the things I wanted to just put to you start off with was you tweet when we launched the episode. You tweeted something that I found really interesting. You'd said that I always thought that someone should do a Physio Matters podcast on this, and it turned out it needed to be me. So what was it that made you then think that this would be something that I hope they do, and not necessarily think that you would be the perfect? Because it's just the reason it tickled me is because I can't think of anyone better to apply. That's a listener that understands what we're about, that understands the format, that seems to enjoy it and like it. That I just imagine that you should have seen yourself in that spot.
Yeah, it's so funny when you, well done remembering my tweet, by the way. That's my pinned tweet on Twitter. Do you remember the phone call that we had when you asked me to do it? Do you remember what I said?
I don't know if I remember it
more or less,
word, but I thought it was on that theme in a way. You were like, "Are you sure?"
Yeah. Basically, I remember seeing a message from you and thinking, God, I wonder if he maybe wants me to do a podcast on dancers. No, surely not. And then when you spoke to me, that's what it was. I think the first thing I said was, "Oh, Jack, there's like 10 people that would be better than I would be," and I started listing off a load of people that you should actually ask instead of being me. And I could literally feel your eyes rolling over the phone, and you were like, "Okay, but I think you should do it." And then you kind of convinced me to do it, and I'm so glad that I did. Now it's terrifying. I found it really, really. I found it really difficult, a little bit terrifying. Had a couple of sleepless nights over it, but I'm so glad that I did. And I think you were probably right in the end. But definitely. I'd always wanted you, because you'd never done anything performance based, and I remember thinking, God, it'd be really interesting if you did. I suppose in the back of my mind, it was like, I wonder if I could do that. And then I did. So that's why I tweeted it. Like, I've always wanted you to, and I'm so glad I was the one to do it.
Well, I need you to take something back already. You think I was probably right. Now, I was right. There's no probably about it. It was a brilliant episode, but also that conversation is a relevant one to some of the stuff we want to talk about today, and some of the stuff that you've reflected in some of the comments on the recent shows we did with Joe Turner. Because that I find interesting, because it's about the application of that theoretical knowledge and the way in which that translates to the live reality of actually delivering care to that population.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that I think I did in that phone call, and have said since, is that for me is, yes, there's an element of confidence that comes to some of this, and I take that for granted sometimes because I'm doing it all the time. I get that, and it's been years in the making, of course. And I remember, I can think back to how I felt when we first got going with this stuff, and there were far more scripts and reading than there were now. But also, it's the rationalist in me just thinks that that's what our audience are particularly interested in, is that translation piece. And there is something to be said about our network being true grassroots support for that style of practice. And having done it, you've come to realize just how it was more compatible than you first thought. And so do you think that is something that in other circumstances that's just going to keep happening, or do you think that is going to be something that you can use as a piece of evidence to yourself to think, yeah, you know, I'm the legit right person for these sorts of gigs?
Yeah, probably what you just said. I think having done it, I've now done 2 other podcasts off the back of that one, and this today with you. Like, I remember when you first asked me and you said to me, remember, it's not live, it's recorded, so if you screw it up, we can just edit it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine then. And here I am, I'm talking to you live. So there's there must be an element of progression there, right? You know, I wouldn't have done this probably first. So yeah, definitely, it's given me a little bit of confidence. And I think the feedback as well, because I got a lot of feedback from dance physios who said, wow, you represented us really well. And I was like, oh, thank God. You know, and also from people that didn't work with dancers, but said, actually, you applied it well so that I can understand what working with dancers is like, which was what we wanted to do, wasn't it? We didn't want it to be too niche. So I feel like getting that feedback was, such a relief, because like I said, I had a couple of sleepless nights after we recorded it thinking, oh, I don't know if it was good, you know, but so to get the feedback was really fantastic.
Yeah, and I just need to lean into the arrogance of saying, well, if I said it's good, you've just got to bloody believe it, haven't you? It's a good idea. It's a good application. And also, the funny thing is, I don't know if this is progression or regression, because obviously this is far more casual and somewhat unplanned, which has its daunting aspects, but also means that anything can go, and we can go off on various tangents as we wish. And this also doesn't need to be a one-off. You know, we can no doubt questions will emerge and things that I'd love to consult you on. And I'm afraid you're just on the hook for various things. I'm afraid now you're in our network and you've proven yourself in it, and so I'll just put you onto a treadmill and turn the speed up if I can. That's the thing, lovely. I want your message to proliferate. Yeah, okay, and I'm up for that totally. It's nice though. We were just saying off air, weren't we, that it's kind of put me in that position where people are now asking me for advice if they see a dancer and they've got a question or something. And you know, people usually contact me on Twitter, and I've ended up then contacting them on WhatsApp and doing kind of. I filmed some videos yesterday for somebody just to help them out with some foot stuff. And I was describing it, and I said, oh, I can't describe it. I'll video you some stuff. And I thought, really, I should put this online so that everyone can see it. But I feel very honored that people would ask my opinion, I guess. But I like the fact that it makes me have to do a good job. So if someone asks for my help, especially if I know they're a good physio, then I need to come back with something really decent, or else, you know, I can't sort of justify the fact that the person that asked me for help has done podcasts and I know is really good physio. So I was on this video pointing out anatomy and saying, do this, do that, and thinking, God, he's really going to know if I'm getting this right or not. And in the end, I think it was very helpful for him. So that is very satisfying. I really enjoy doing that stuff. Yeah, no, that's a great point, I think, as well. It's sometimes the act of consulting on things, especially interprofessionally and stuff, does mean that you just, it steps you up, doesn't it? It stops you definitely, and also then you produce some of your best work under that pressure. Now it's as long as that then also informs and punches the imposter a little bit. I think that would be obviously the dream combo. One of the things that cropped up about that is I found it fascinating when you commented. I hope you don't mind me saying this because it was a public comment, but you commented on mine and Joe Turner's conversation last week about imposter syndrome. And I said, quite, you know, it's as the thought emerged, really, I said, like, I'm amazed at that because Liz is such a competent and professional performer that I had probably clumsily assumed that confidence would just go beyond its specific context, right? And also probably I projected a bit there, like, on a moment's notice, it's as terrible a dancer I am, as someone that Rob Tyre, who happens to also be loitering in the comment section here, said on Twitter that I'm not much of a dancer. But amusingly, I don't know why I would, but if someone said for whatever reason, please, it'd be a favor if you go and dance on that stage in front of people for a bit, they're into it just don't bother me. Right, that's just me as of a disposition. So I probably did make that assumption of you, and I was wrong.
You're not the only one, though. You're not the only one. So I did a podcast with Matt Phillips for the STA, and in the middle of that, he literally said exactly what you just said. He said, because we were talking about online consultations, and he said, did you ever get nervous doing it? And he said, I don't imagine you're someone that lacks confidence, being someone that can go on stage and dance. And if you watch the podcast, I go, yeah. And inside I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding. I know I project that, and I think that's part of being a performer, probably. And I think as a person, yes, I'm confident, but like what really made me realize was being a physio. So once I sort of stopped being a dancer, by the way, I thought I didn't have imposter syndrome as a dancer. I've reflected on that because I knew we were going to talk about it, and I think I probably did a little bit. And it's probably just part of who I am. It's just that I've got high standards, and I have a bit of self-doubt, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because I think it pushes you to be better.
Sure.
But yeah, so Matt thought the same thing. He was like, oh, you have loads of confidence. I can see you do. And I sort of nod knowingly thinking, well, sort of. Like what really got me was training to be a physio and being assessed. Like, you know, all those student placements, and it literally has a box that says confidence, and they have to rate your confidence. And you know, I'm great with MSK, and I always have been because I was a sports therapist before being a physio, as you know. But you know, stick me on an ICU ward, and my confidence just goes like, I was terrified. I remember seeing my results for actually it was a good result, but my confidence was low on it. And I remember thinking, God, I've never thought of myself as someone that isn't confident. But actually, it made me really learn a lot about myself because I'm not. But why would you be? Like, I'd never done suctioning and, you know, all the crazy multi-systems analysis, which I love. I don't particularly love the practical part of respiratory, if I'm honest. But yeah, but it was the physio stuff that made me really realize that I'm not probably as confident as I come across all the time. And that's probably the case. It's the case with a lot of things. This is going to sound really dark, but it's a good example. But you know, the people that commit suicide are the ones that were laughing on social media the day before. Like that projection that you have, that's a very dark comparison, but that's sort of, it's not always what you see, I guess.
Well, it's the extreme of that notion, isn't it? That there are fronts and performative aspects to everything, and unfortunately, sometimes it can be such a potent and powerful mask that it can also then be masking serious mental illness and therefore self-destructive tendency at its worst.
Yeah, and we know performers often have poor mental health. So
yeah, which is something. I mean, this is the thing that I feel a bit guilty of, is that in our podcast together and some of the afterwards stuff and some of the off-air conversations that we'd had, you had sort of hinted at the fact that sometimes that is those are relevant variables, and we talked a bit about eating disorder, smoking, we talked about some of the other general health and lifestyle factors that can surround it, that sometimes there is, and also, you know, I know that the nature of performativity and mask wearing, both literally and figuratively in your industry, it means that you've got that as being a factor I knew was in play. Yet I just didn't put that on my mate Liz, you know, and that assumed that the joining the dots, not just only that, yes, also a dancer performer, but also someone that I just know as a confident lady I love to chat to. And then I thought that then as an educator, that would just come for the ride. Do you think that then the true sense of expertise that you had as a professional dancer, and the fact that you were then no doubt sometimes performing at the top of your skill set, but then also the act of dancing, something more routine, I imagine, is just so busman's holiday type in terms of what it is. Is it because of the fact that there's some novelty to having to present stuff, you know, going live on talking about professional issues, or recording something that I'm glad you took it as seriously as you did, and it produced such a brilliant podcast with us. But is the relevant difference there the sort of time served, do you think, or the level of time served expertise that you had relative to the different industries?
What was it? I'm not. Do you know what I did think about? I was trying to think what the difference was, right? And I think part of, and Joe, I think, is listening, so you can tell me if I'm wrong about this with imposter syndrome. Part of it, to me, comes down to how you see yourself and your identity. I don't know if this is answering your question now, Jack, but stop me if I'm going off on one. It comes down to so we talked about in the podcast about how being a dancer is more than just what you do, it's about who you are. And particularly for dancers, it's like, it's what you do from when you first have memories. So like, I've always been a dancer. It's always how I identify myself. When people ask me what I do now, I'm like, I'm a physio. Oh, but I'm also a dancer. I hate to I never let it go. Sure. But that kind of helped me feel that I belonged, I think. But the physio part, I don't know if this is answering your question, but the physio part, because it's my second career and it's something that I came into older, and that when I work with, say, like band 7s will be younger than I am, for example. This is when I first started. So when I was a band 5, the band 7s would be younger than I was, and I was like, oh, it just sort of, the power sort of thing was different in it. That doesn't answer your question, does it? I'm not sure.
It does. It's I was putting words in your mouth a little bit in terms of time served, but also what you've added there is also just, there's an age-related and a power-related hierarchy dynamic that comes for the ride, almost with those features. The thing that Liz, not Liz, you're Liz, sorry, Jo has just said. She said, do you think there's an element of performance when we're with patients, but that interprofessionally we can't rely on that? So therefore, I think that's. I'll admit that sort of makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yes, there's also an element of when you're with a patient, you know more than they do generally. So that kind of gives me a sense of, I guess I feel a bit more confident as I'm talking. Like I know they're not necessarily analysing what I'm saying, like as if I was explaining a condition to you, you'd be analysing it on the same level as me, whereas the patients generally don't know as much as you do. And that kind of puts me in a place of security, I suppose.
Yeah.
Again,
that relative, the relative expertise with who you're actually conversing with.
Yeah. So when you're so what was it? Is there an element of performance when with patients? So yeah, there probably is. Like you're kind of taking on the role of the physio, aren't you? Yeah. It's sort of like a performance, I guess. So interprofessionally, it's kind of all neck and neck. And I think that's what was so hard about doing the podcast, the Physio Matters podcast, because I knew that people would be listening to that had way more experience than I did, and and I nearly did it then, and we're real physios. I nearly said that. I didn't even include myself in that branch. So that just shows you how much it's not in my identity. It is now, like 5 years after having graduated, but yeah.
That's something that I find. I'm finding increasingly frequently, and also I think that's the nature of this show, is we've been able to sort of have that time to do it. Physio Matters runs as a monthly podcast that covers usually a topic, and it therefore isn't. There isn't a circumstance where we'd get into these sorts of weeds, really.
Yeah.
And on chewing it over, we've been able to sort of unpack that a little bit. And as we have done, more and more people have sort of admitted to what lies beneath sometimes some of what they're doing interprofessionally, which is the work that I'm championing. But also they are, like you are, giving people the sort of confidence to say that, these elements of self-doubt need to be grappled with, understanding what is these complex identity related issues that sort of do affect us, and also what can be used for good, as you've mentioned. Sometimes it holds yourself to a high standard, but then also what can be crippling self-doubt that means you don't go and do something that would have been brilliant is not cool either. So trying to find that balance is fascinating. Now, on this week's set of shows, Liz, I've also got a friend of mine coming on tomorrow who's talking a bit about the pubs and bars reopening, talking sort of about hospitality and COVID and things like that. And he'll be pleased to hear that we won't be doing much of a health angle there, apart from obviously I would say that sociologically that is an important health intervention for us to get back out there and get back drinking and the like. But you'd mentioned about the effect that it's had theatres being closed, not just, and I could ask this question, not just professionally with you working in that industry, but also just it's something that you love that side of our culture, and it's a massive important part of your life. So if you could just reflect on how that's been and how excited you are for that getting going again.
Yeah. I mean, God, I cannot wait for the day that I actually go and sit in the theatre and watch the first show that people have performed in over a year. Actually, I was really lucky. Around December, theatres were open again. Do you remember, like just before the new year?
Yeah.
My birthday.
It was like every other seat and stuff.
It was like yes, and my birthday's in December, so we happened to go to the theatre. And actually, I went and saw Adam Kay reading his you know, the medical, he's a doctor, isn't he? A doctor comedian. Went and saw him reading his stuff, which was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, it was like 2 of us and then 4 seats free and then 2 other people, and everyone was masked. And but just to be in a theatre was thrilling. That was actually in the theatre that I worked in backstage when it used to show Singing in the Rain. So to be in the actual theatre as a like a guest was just so exciting. But literally the night we were there, that was the last show they did, and it closed the next day. So Adam Kay was on stage saying, right, well, it was lovely to see you. This is the last one for we don't know how long. And that was literally the last show he did. And that's when lockdown sort of hit again. Is that right? Timescales?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was when they locked everything down again. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was like this little flicker of a window when a few shows did open, but it was literally like, I think everyone's talking about Jamie opened for 4 nights and then closed again. So to get that show open, they were in online rehearsals, they were in socially distanced rehearsals, and just absolute mania. They opened up, everything was bubbled, so everyone had to change living arrangements and things. They performed for 4 nights, and then Boris Johnson made that announcement and they had to close completely again. So it's just been heart-wrenching for the performers, and massive financial implications for them, obviously. People in shows like that, I believe, are either furloughed or they're paid through their contract. But so many people that were in shows that were about to open, or they were sort of 3 weeks away from starting rehearsals, and they just lost their jobs with no financial support and no backup. So it's been huge, and obviously lockdown's been huge for everybody, but theatre-wise,
it's a short career in many ways as well, and there's proper emergent moments, isn't it? Someone might be a chorus performer, a dancer, that's then on the breakthrough auditioning for bigger roles and stuff, but that's unstable by design as a career, as a breakthrough artist like that. And then the time chunks, I think of this in professional sport as well, with regards to some of the Olympians that have then been postponing. And I saw some data about the drop-off rate with regards to those that qualified for the Olympics that then are otherwise injured or have then not been able to maintain, and the difference there from that delay. It's not dissimilar in that there's people that were at their peak and were about to break through on various things, that it's not necessarily a given that then I mean, we hope they do, but the whole circumstances around the world changing means that those opportunities may well not return, and the mental health equally that comes with that in this industry, not to mention that the large financial implications of not necessarily being able to, hopefully the bustle of the theatre, it's full again soon, but that's not even a given, is it?
Well, no, I mean, theatres are planning to open in May, June kind of time. Like, I've even looked at booking seats for various shows, and actually they're booking like normal now because there's no restrictions as of June, as far as I understand it. So, and I think seats are selling.
That's the legal restriction. You just don't know about consumer behaviour. That's the thing. I mean, looking at the pubs, it probably is going to be fairly liberal with that, and people are going to just feel like everyone's sort of following the letter of the law, and so people will go and be licking each other's eyeballs by the summertime, maybe. But
I don't know though. Sitting, you know, bum to bum with people in a theatre for 2 plus 3 hours is very different from sitting in a beer garden. You know, I wonder whether people need to kind of get just back to normal a little bit before they have the confidence to do that. But then there'll be the crazy theatre nuts like me that won't care, and they'll be like, oh, stick me in a box and I'll go.
You just do the sit-in for a week or something, won't you? Just playing whatever auditions are on or whatever it might be that's happening there. So
exactly.
I think there's enough of that though, and there's enough of a craving for some of those cultural norms again, and for us to re-engage with art. And there is also a massive differential in people's income and outgoings have been varied in such a way. Like, people have had major disruptions, but there's also people that have been straight through with nothing to spend it on. There's people that I know that they feel plenty guilty about it, but they're not necessarily well-paid people, but they're just people that's outgoings have decreased, their income is stable at the time, and therefore they've
got surplus.
They'll be sitting front row because which they've never thought of doing. You know, they've said that, and I spoke over the weekend to friends who knew I was doing this podcast with you and stuff. And oh, that's interesting, and said that typically I'm so looking forward to that we'll be paying for more expensive seats because we're so excited about doing so. And there is that differential exists in society now, where I think that probably it will burst back to life, and I think rightly so. I've been concerned about the socializing aspect. It's something I'll talk about with Chris tomorrow about the pub stuff, but just generally, like, especially especially those younger than you or I, or in different circumstances. Like, I'm mortified at the fact that like singletons in their 20s not being able to make out with strangers in nightclubs. I can't even imagine. What a bizarre world.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even have to answer that.
Sorry, that's even me blurting, I guess.
It's true, but I think that's the big thing about theatre and creatives, is that we're social beings as humans, but there's something about that industry that is so viscerally, humanly about contact. Like you get there in the morning and everyone's literally on top of each other, hugging and kissing. You dance in someone else's arms, you act with someone, you kiss them on stage, it's just so, it's all about human connection. So to have lost not only being able to see it, but being able to be part of it, and like people have been doing online rehearsals, they've been doing self-tapes as auditions. So rather than getting to go to an audition where you'd maybe see 10 or 15 of your friends that you always see, go for a drink afterwards, have a chat, have a laugh, everyone's doing self-tapes at home. It couldn't be more isolated or clinical, and it's just, it's drained everybody so much. We're just so desperate to get back. But then there's that worrying feeling of, we were here back in, October, like autumn last year, when things were starting to open up, and there's that little bit of everybody that's thinking, oh my God, what if? What if? So and of course the financial implications of that. So theatre producers are having to be really careful. So they're choosing to put on shows that tend to have less people in them. They're hiring less people in the orchestras just in case, to save money here and there. Really? So not only have we had all of that, but now there's less jobs out there. Auditions are rammed. Also, people that would normally have taken jobs at a higher level, like principals and things, are now like, well, I'll just go for something lower because I just need a job. So everything is kind of,
well, it compresses that market completely, doesn't it?
Totally.
If those that were on that breakthrough or were principals that are then in the chorus for the sake of taking something, or there are also people that are just in a situation where they just need to be within a comfort zone. And actually want to do that as I'll do a few shows down a grade almost. I know that's probably not the right lingo, sorry, but I can understand that rationale. I think people just want to get back out there, but maybe don't want to be the one in the spotlight necessarily as much. But also there'll be those that are craving exactly that. So it's a fascinating thing. Thank you so much for exploring it with me. I've got a question here from David Poulter. He's asked, is there a difference between stage fright and imposter syndrome?
That's a good question. Isn't it? Oh, David. Is there? I suppose you get stage fright because you're worried that something's going to go wrong. Like for me, when I used to be dancing, say, for example, with a partner, and we were doing like lifts and things, in the back of my mind was always like, Jesus, what if he drops me? Like just the embarrassment of that, which, by the way, did happen once. But stage fright, I don't know, is that imposter syndrome? Is it a feeling like you're not good enough? I think they're different, but I wouldn't be able to articulate why, if I'm completely honest. Stage fright is also, I think it's just a massive amount of adrenaline that gives you that kind of fight or flight response, I suppose, is kind of what stage fright is, I guess, which doesn't necessarily link into feeling that you don't fit there or that self-doubt. It's a good question. I'm not sure.
I think one of the similarities, I guess, would be the consequences of a bad experience there. In imposter syndrome, it's been the thought of being found out as being a fraud. Whereas in stage fright, it'd be more the fact that you're not able to perform, and therefore the consequences are both largely embarrassing moments that could throw you off and demoralize you.
Stage fright is it's about live performance, I think, because if something goes wrong, there's nowhere to hide. That because I don't think you get that when you do things that are recorded. A bit like the podcast, you don't get that when you do things that are recorded. But going onto a live stage where there's 2,000 people watching you, if you trip or if you get something wrong, or you go the wrong direction, that's quite scary to have to deal with. I think that's more what stage fright is about, is the liveness of it, and the possibility that things can properly go wrong, which has happened to me. I've fallen over on stage, I've been dropped on stage, I've fallen off the edge of a stage once.
Wow. My little sister was one of the 7 dwarves in a pantomime years ago, in full costume, and then fell off onto the drum kit. And the audience, it's pantomime, they just thought that was part of it. Rip-roaring laughter, and were disappointed it didn't happen on the next showing. Joe Turner has asked, or she suggested, maybe the imposter syndrome would kick in after the performance, perhaps.
That
might be something that you comprehend. We're out of time, Liz, which I'm upset about. We could go on, and I'm sure can do this again if we can afford the time. But I also just want to say again, thank you so much for being our woman in this space for at the moment. You know, there's a lot of interest, a lot of hunger. For anyone that's interested, please do get in touch with Liz either via us or Liz, give them your contact information or Twitter handles and the like.
All right, well, easy. It's Liz Bayley Physio, Bayley spelled with a Y. What else? Oh, I need to mention this as well. So I think I'm going to be doing a regular podcast with Bill Taylor, who's the consultant physio for the Scottish Ballet. So we've done like a little thing that we did with EV Physios Online, which I think is probably going to be released this week. So I'm at great risk of overexposure now that this is out this week as well. But yeah, me and Bill are going to do a podcast. We're going to try and aim it more at dancers, kind of give them patient useful information. But that's going to be floating around in the next few weeks or months.
Fantastic.
As
well, when that gets off the ground, then obviously feel free. You and Bill could launch it or release it or shout about it on this show or elsewhere. So do let us know, and we'll champion that. That sounds brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
But in the meantime, something that we've got, I suppose, as news that I had forgotten to say, for those that have been, we only have 10. We've got the last 10 units for April delivery for the Active Force 2 units. So they've been really popular, and we've really struggled to get the stock because of all the supply issues and complexities around that you can imagine because of COVID. Even the Suez Canal thing seems to have affected us. And so you've got to get your hands on those. Go to physio-matters.com /AF2, and we've got the last 10 of those, which we can guarantee for April delivery. So please do snap them up if you're interested. But anyway, that's enough for me. I'll see you tomorrow for, as I mentioned, me and Chris Pollard, who's a friend of mine who works in hospitality. He's going to be talking a little bit about the how that industry's got on and reopening with a bang and all that sort of stuff. Overlaps really nicely with this conversation.
Yeah, it will do. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Liz. We'll speak to you.
Thanks, Jack. See you later.